Great. Thanks very much. Good morning. Bonjour. The events of the past few days are creating a lot of anxiety for Ontario families. Statements by President Trump are a threat to people's livelihoods, our way of life, and our sovereignty. It's serious. Les déclarations du président.
The statements by President Trump are dangerous for jobs, our lifestyle, and our sovereignty. It's serious.
This week, Premier Ford stated numerous times that stability was the most important thing right now in the face of these threats. He's right. And at the same time, after being asked multiple times, he refused to rule out a snap election call. Nous savons que Doug Ford...
We know that Doug Ford spent billions of dollars while he's preparing to trigger early elections.
Has spent billions on his plan for an early election call. Booze at the corner store, election rebate checks, and an obscene amount of money on ads that the Auditor General calls clearly partisan. Elections, by their nature, create uncertainty, and they require vast amounts of energy, money, and effort. The kind of effort that we need to use to come together in the face of the challenges that are in front of us. Les familles ontariennes n'ont...
Ontario families do not need an election, provincial election in this time.
What Ontario families need right now. They need stability. Stability to face the threat to their livelihoods. Stability to find them a family doctor. Stability to address the crisis in affordability. The Premier needs to put aside his own personal and political interests and put the interests of Ontario families first. Ontario Liberals are calling on Premier Ford to unequivocally rule out an early election call, recall the legislature, establish an all-party committee to address the threat of tariffs, and at least, in any event, bring all four-party leaders together in to brief them regularly, as we did when we faced COVID. And I heard the Premier mention COVID in his remarks this morning, and I'm encouraged by that in the sense that it sounds like he wants to work together. But the proof will be in the pudding to see if he can do the three things that we've just asked him to do. And I'll take any questions.
Well, you mentioned COVID, John, but what I heard in that room, and I stand corrected, listen to it back, but he was using that as his game plan for calling an election. He said, I'll have to inject billions of dollars into the economy if Trump goes ahead with these tariffs, and I won't have consensus to do that, so I'll need a new man. That's what I heard in those remarks.
Doug Ford has one of the strongest majorities in Ontario history. One of them. He's got a stable government. It will not fall, unlike the federal government, for the next 17 months. Explain to me why we need an election. He's done everything with consensus, within his party, with the majority that he has. He doesn't need an election. The reason that Doug Ford wants an election is not for Ontario families. It's not to get a consensus from people. It's so that he will get a longer mandate. He wants to be Premier for a third time. And he can do that. But do it at a time when an election is right for Ontario families. I've watched Doug Ford on Fox News and other American channels, and it's like the same thing's happening there. It's like he's trying to charm offensive. He's trying to suck up, and at the same time, he says he's standing up over here. Well, Premier, you can't say you want stability. The same thing. You can't suck and blow at the same time. You can't say you want stability and then create uncertainty. An election, by its nature, is uncertain. It's uncertain of the outcome. And our effort should not be out there running to have an election to create uncertainty. Well, people are worried about their jobs. Well, people are worried about feeding their families. Where people are worried about our sovereignty. Like, that's just ridiculous. Like, If the Premier calls an election, it will be totally self-serving and in his self-interest. That's why he would call an election. There is no other rationale. I don't care whether he says he needs a mandate to spend billions of dollars. He already spends billions of dollars without a mandate. He's going to spend $200 million on partisan ads by the end of this fiscal year since the last election. He doesn't need that. That's bogus. That's just a load of hooey.
Why do you think he won't say? You touched on the notion that the Premier was asked multiple times the other day when he scrummed here whether he would rule out an election or not. Wouldn't say one way or the other. Why do you think he will not rule it out?
Because the Premier wants to put his political and personal interests ahead of the interests of Ontario families. I don't think it's unreasonable to say that an election in a period of instability, which is what we have right now, is the last thing that you want. We know there's going to be a federal election. Right? It's going to happen. This guy's got a mandate for 18 months. Come on. We need the Premier to be serious right now. He needs to lead. He needs to work with other people. He needs to bring people together. That's not what you do during an election. An election, it's a competition. It creates uncertainty. It's a battle. We've got a bigger battle to fight, right?
You mentioned the television appearances the Premier has made critically. Don't you think, though, that he has no choice? The Premier's, him and others have had to step into the role that would normally be played, one would imagine, by a federal government, because at the moment the federal government is a headless monster.
I was really encouraged to hear this morning that Mr. LeBlanc is not running for the federal leadership and that he's leading our efforts down there. I think he's very capable. I think the leadership of the federal government is there. You know, I know there's some uncertainty with that regards, but we all have to work together. That's what I'm trying to say. It's not just working together with other provinces or other parliamentarians. It's working together with all parties. It's working together with people on the other side of the border. And that work is quiet and hard and takes a lot of effort. Like, you know, I think he's appearing more on American TV talking about this than he is talking to Ontario families. It's like, we have TV up here too. You know, I watch some of those interviews and I'll be honest, they make me cringe. They're kind of cringeworthy. It's like, are you trying to charm them and at the same time trying to stand up against them? Like, you can't suck and blow. It's just at the same time. It doesn't work that way. And, you know, I just think the quiet work of working together with other people, all people, we all need to be there. There's only one way through this thing, and that's everybody together. And history's proven that time and time again in situations like this. It's a serious situation and it requires everybody to work together. And the Premier has to rise above what are his own political interests and put the interest of Ontario families and Canada in front of that. And that's why he should do the three things. Number one, rule out an early election. Number two, recall the legislature. And number three, either establish an all-party committee or bring the leaders in like we did in COVID. That's what he needs to do. Simple, straightforward. Let's all work together.
John, what do you think of the Premier's announcement yesterday that they're redeploying 200 OPP officers to do border enforcement, not at the points of entry regularly here in the province, but, you know, effectively beefing up border security? Is that not part of the solution here?
I think that that's part of the solution, and working with others, because we're going to need more than the OPP. We're going to need to work with the RCMP and, you know, to satisfy the concerns of President Trump. And so I don't disagree with that. I think that's a good thing. The thing that I'm trying to make a point of today is we have a real challenge in front of us. And we don't need any more uncertainty than we just got in a heaping dose yesterday and for weeks before. So the Premier needs to assure us that he's not going to go into an election and create more uncertainty, and then come together and work with everybody. Like he talked about COVID this morning, and that's what we did in COVID. Same kind of challenge.
That policing plan, the province hasn't said what it'll cost, and it seems like this is just a shifting of existing emergency response team members in the OPP in communities across the province. Do you worry that there might be a loss of service or a loss of focus with this change?
Well, the concern would be that if you started to lose some community policing in communities across Ontario where the OPP are serving, that would be of great concern to those communities. So I think that the Premier has to move in a way. It's going to require an extra investment. He's going to have to work with the federal government. It's something that we do together. It's not about running out to be in the front of the parade. It's about working together. Great. No, perfect. Thank you very much. Okay.